My name is Rock Manor, and this is my horror therapy session with Bleeding Critic. He looked waxy in the casket, not the way I remembered him when he was alive. Gone was the beard stubble, the rosy cheeks. Gone was the life of my grandfather. It was the first funeral I had ever been to. I was about 9 or 10 years old and in the 3rd grade. And it wasn't until we had to move, to let the other people behind us actually get their view of the deceased. That's when it really started to kick in that he was gone. Later that evening, the family gathered at my aunt's house. Not necessarily a wake kind of ceremony, but it was similar to one. There was food, drinks, conversation, that kind of thing. The adults were in the kitchen and the kids were in the living room. While I was playing in the living room, I happened to look up at the staircase. It was one of those staircases that ran up the side of the house and then disappeared beyond the ceiling if you were looking at it from the living room. When I looked at the staircase, there were 2 bare feet standing on the highest visible step right there. They just stood there, as if they had climbed the stairs and decided to stop right at that point. No shoes, no socks, just bare feet. They were large and adult, so I knew it wasn't, one of the kids in the living room. And I could even see the hairs on one of the toes. And it was mid-October. No one was walking around in bare feet in mid-October. We were wearing jackets at the time. Then, before I had time to really understand what I was seeing, the feet moved, went up the step, and then completely disappeared beyond the ceiling. I rushed to the bottom of the stairs, thinking maybe my dad or uncle had, decided to go up there. The stairwell was empty. I looked around the living room. All the kids were there. I went into the kitchen. All the adults were there, too. "Did someone go upstairs?" I asked. I remember my mom looking at me, and then she looked around at everyone in the kitchen. "Not that I know of," was her response. "I saw someone go upstairs." "What about your brother?" she asked. "No, he's in the living room." "Never mind," I said. I thought about those feet, but there wasn't anyone up there. Everyone was downstairs. Adults in the kitchen, kids in the living room. I couldn't explain it, and I didn't want to. And I also think at the time, my little brain at the moment just went off into another direction. I think I just started resuming playing, not even thinking about it anymore because it was just beyond my comprehension at the time. But one thing's for sure, after that moment, I was afraid to go upstairs in my aunt and uncle's house. Visiting their house was never the same after that. It wasn't until I was in high school and college, when people gathered together to tell true ghost stories, that I would bring it up. It was the only kind of quote-unquote paranormal experience I've ever had, if it was that at all. When it comes to true quote-unquote ghost stories, I'm a bit skeptic on those. I view horror as entertainment, which is an industry I work in. Which is why the next part I'm about to tell you really struck a nerve. Years after the bare feet, years after my cousin had been born, years after high school and college, we were at a family gathering. It was Christmas. And my aunt and my mother decided to tell a story that happened shortly after the incident that I had experienced at the same house. It was shortly after my cousin had been born, so that was about 3 months apart from when my grandfather passed, and it was 3 months after I had seen the bare feet. I didn't put 2 and 2 together until later in time. They were at my aunt's house, and they were sitting at the kitchen table, and they had the baby monitor on the table, and my cousin was upstairs in his crib sleeping, and they heard the baby crying. And naturally, my aunt rose from the table and made her way up the stairs. And as my mother was sitting there, she heard a voice come over the baby monitor. My mother heard a man's voice say, "Shh, here's your binky." A moment later, my aunt returned to the kitchen. "He's fine. I thought maybe his pacifier had fallen out." That's when my mother told her about the male voice. It was at this point of the story, during Christmas gathering, I asked both of them, whose voice was it? And my mother turned to me and said, "It was your grandpa's."